Hey Mustangs, this is the first video in a series of videos I will be creating for you in order to help you understand what's going on with current events. We're not going to start where you think we would with viruses. We're actually going to start with bacteria first because there are a few key points, key ideas that you need to understand about bacteria so that way you don't confuse them with viruses later on. So the first major point that we need to make here is that bacteria and viruses are not the same thing. That's a huge misconception that many students have, but bacteria and viruses are not the same thing. Saying that bacteria and viruses are the same thing is like saying chickens and humans are the same thing, just because they're both multicellular organisms. Okay? We know that these are two different types of organisms here. So bacteria and viruses are not the same. And we can't even say bacteria and viruses are two different types of organisms because technically viruses are not considered living. Bacteria are, but viruses aren't. A few other differences besides the fact that bacteria are living and viruses aren't is that bacteria are bigger than viruses. They're more complex than viruses, not by much, but slightly more complex than viruses. And they have different shapes as well. So bacteria, three basic shapes for bacteria. You have the bacillus shape, which is the rod shape that you usually see, the spirilla shape, which is the spiral shape we see here, and then the sphere shape, which is called the coccyx shape that we see with bacteria. With viruses, we see really interesting and unique geometric shapes when we take a close look at viruses. Bacteria can actually be infected by viruses. So a bacteria can actually become sick and die from a virus. So that's what we see going on here in this image. These green things are viruses that have infected a bacteria. So what exactly are bacteria? First major thing, bacteria are living things. They're not multicellular like most people think of when they think of living thing, so plants, animals, and stuff like that. They are a single cell, but they are still considered living. They are prokaryotes. So bacteria, if you remember way back to beginning of the school year, we talked about pro, no, you do. So bacteria are prokaryotes. They have no nucleus and no membrane-bound organelles. So if we take a look at this image here, this is a single cell, single bacteria. That means it has a cell membrane. The little dots represent ribosomes. There's the DNA on the inside, but no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles. And then finally, they're microscopic. You cannot see bacteria, at least a single bacteria, you cannot see it with the naked eye. You need a microscope in order to see it. Whenever you see images like this of bacteria, each of these circles is millions or hundreds of millions of bacteria all growing in one single space, and that's why you can actually see them. Bacteria are extremely successful. Bacteria are found everywhere, in the soil, in the water, floating in the air, and on just about every single surface. Right now on my computer, on my table, bacteria is found on us, on the outside of us, and bacteria is even found on the inside of us as well. And that sounds kind of scary, but we'll talk about that later on, about how bacteria are actually a good thing, especially when we talk about the bacteria inside of us. They can even be found in some of the most inhospitable places on the planet. So every biome, every habitat, you're going to find bacteria, but places where you wouldn't expect to even find life, you're going to actually find bacteria as well. So here we have ocean floor vents and also hot springs as well. So actually that color that you actually see is actually believed to be caused by the bacteria there. And then another thing that makes them super successful is going to be how they reproduce. So they reproduce at a very, very fast rate. So one bacteria, specifically E. coli, you've probably heard of E. coli before. One single E. coli bacteria can become 10 million E. coli bacteria in just 12 hours. That's how fast they reproduce. So what exactly do they do? Most people, when they think of bacteria, they think, ew, gross, nasty, disgusting, it makes me sick. But bacteria are one of the most important organisms on the planet. Bacteria are decomposers. They help recycle matter and nutrients. Without bacteria, there would be no life on this planet. So if you think back to our ecology units, we learned that producers were extremely important for transferring energy around. Bacteria are extremely important for recycling matter. Without them, life would not be possible. So they have a very, very, very important role to play on our planet. So here we see this pineapple decomposing here. So it's the bacteria breaking it apart, and then those nutrients they use for themselves, but also they help release other materials that can be recycled and used by other living things in the future. Some bacteria are nitrogen fixers. So if you remember, nitrogen gas is useless to living things in the gas form. So there are certain types of bacteria that can convert that nitrogen gas into a more usable form that plants can use. And if you remember, that nitrogen is needed for the plants to make their proteins and also to incorporate into their nucleic acids as well. How do they reproduce? So they reproduce extremely fast. Bacteria reproduce through the process of binary fission. Binary fission, it's going to sound familiar to you if we take a look at the steps here. The cell grows bigger, makes a copy of the DNA, and splits in two. So right now, if you think back to what we've learned over the course of the year, you should be thinking about mitosis. Mitosis is very similar, but not quite the same. They have a lot of similarities, and there are a few differences between them. So again, the bacteria is going to grow bigger, make a copy of DNA, and then split into two identical halves. And we call that binary fission. So that's what we see here. So if we take some time and we watch this right here, if you watch closely, you'll actually see the bacteria elongating. We don't see the DNA replication occurring, but it's happening, and then they split into two identical halves. Last thing here, bacteria do one of the coolest things, one thing that no other organism on the planet can actually do. And I'm going to geek out on this, nerd out on this, because it is really actually pretty cool. Bacteria can pick up DNA that's not theirs and use it. No other organism on our planet can do that. So there's three ways that they can do it. There's transformation, conjugation, and transduction. Transformation is where they pick up DNA from a surface, from a bacteria that has died. So let's say you spray down your countertop, you kill a whole bunch of bacteria, other bacteria eventually land there. They can actually pick up DNA from the dead bacteria and they can actually use it. That would be the equivalent of you finding someone that's dead, kind of morbid here, and you like their eyes or something, so you pick some of their DNA up and all of a sudden you have like blue eyes. Okay, so it's really, really cool because no other organism can do that. There's conjugation, which is two bacteria that are alive get together and they exchange DNA. And then there's transduction, where they can pick up DNA from a virus and use that DNA. So here we see bacteria sharing, so this is conjugation. Okay, so two bacteria get together and they exchange DNA, picking up DNA that's not theirs and actually using it. Benefits to this: adds new genes, mutations, and we're going to see later on in another video. It is a huge, huge thing when you're talking about how bacteria can develop antibiotics resistance.